Trope had their rather impressive debut over 4 years ago, and since then, they've been touring with some prog rock bigwigs, including Soen, King's X, Haken, The Pineapple Thief, Symphony X. That's some serious prog royalty, and that's really good company. And I gotta wonder how much of that rubbed off on Diana and Moonhead. Now, they told me the last time I interviewed them about their goal of producing something bigger, something even proggier than their debut. So, now, the result is about to be released. How did they do? Did they reach their goals? Wait about 15 seconds, and I'll tell you what I think. Hey Prog Noggins, Dave here. This is Bleeding Edge with your weekly album review. This week, as mentioned, the newest album from Trope, Dyad, is set for release very, very soon. And it's a big one. It's a double album. Now, the band, of course, remains, up to this point, Diana Studenberg on vocals and lyrics, and the man known as Moonhead on bass, guitars, piano, keyboards, drum programming, vocals, lyrics. And because I think he was getting bored, he also produced, mixed, and engineered the album. The man is a busy guy. Obviously, he does a lot of different things. They're both actually busy. Diana's rather multi-talented herself, does a lot of acting on the side, so they've got plenty to keep themselves engaged. And one, of course, wonders, how did this translate into the album? Meanwhile, you know, all that hobnobbing with the funny people. I'm going to edit this fucking shit. Meanwhile, all that hobnobbing with prog rock royalty and all that stuff means they were able to get themselves some rather big name guests on this album. We've got Gavin Harrison doing some drumming, and Tony Franklin. Some of you are going to remember him from a lot of things, but in particular, in my mind, he's always big for his time with The Firm, first off, and then later Blue Murder. A band that is criminally overlooked in the world of hair metal. Telling you, Blue Murder, seek out that debut album. It kicks ass. And to see them in a show with King's X and Billy Squier back in 1989, that was a show to remember. But I digress. I mean, those two join in for the song Here's to the Lonely. Elsewhere, on the song Golden Brown, you've got some drumming from Gunnar Olsen, known for his work with A Perfect Circle and Pussifer. So he gets around with some rather well-known people. And then finally, drums on pretty much everything else is Max Botko. It's 17 songs on this double album. I can't tell you how many minutes that all adds up to, because the way I had the music available to me didn't tally it all up, and I really couldn't even easily see all the song lengths. I could if I really wanted to and wanted to work, but that sounded like effort, so I didn't. So I don't know how long it is. That's all I'm saying. It is divided into side A and side B, the former being the more progressive rock-oriented part of it, and the latter is more alt-rock in nature. At least that's the way they describe it. I think that's a pretty good description. It's not what I would call a concept album, though the title is rather reflected in multiple ways, not the least of which is the fact that they are a duo at this point, and also to the dual nature of the band reflected in their blend of progressive and alternative rock influences, things that you just tend to think of as not really things that go together. It's an unusual blend, and it's something that's fairly unique to them. So, Dyad, there you go. It's what it means. So, before we start the actual breakdown, I want to say don't take a moment, please, to like and subscribe, if I can coin a phrase. And a reminder of my methodology: I take each album, I break it down into 4 categories: intellectual, innovative, technical, and emotional, and I rate each of those on a 1 to 5 scale. And if the final raw score doesn't quite match my personal experience of an album, I might add or subtract a personal enjoyment modifier, as I like to call it, and it gets the final score. And that's how I keep myself, God willing, consistent and organized, and help it all make sense to you guys, because otherwise I could just probably ramble and not make any damn sense at all. So that's what I do. So that means, as always, we start off with intellectual. Now, Trope's music isn't really music, I would say, that's about intellect as much as it's about deep emotions. The lyrics here, as they were on the first album, very poetic, deeply personal, maybe even more so this time around. It almost confessional in nature, because this is somebody who's really wearing their feelings and their emotions on their sleeves. I at times think they seem so raw that I have to wonder if this is a lot of Diana processing her own emotions or Moonhead processing his emotions, because they both write on this album around this time. I think in the past it was mostly, if not exclusively, Diana, but I certainly know she is a bit of a poet outside of the music as well. So I have to feel like at times this is very much coming from their own lived experience. And these lyrics reflect on many aspects of interpersonal relationships, though seemingly, at least on this album, more frequently on the raw side of them, often delving into stories of false promises and disappointment and misplaced trust. Now, it's not all a downer. Don't take it to be that I'm saying. Hidden within are definitely some images of resilience and defiance and hope and even finding love again. So there is some optimism amidst all of that raw pain that's there at times. The intellectualism in this album really is in the poetry of the lyrics. They're both lush and unique imagery, and yet nicely open to individual interpretation. So what I might hear as one thing, you might hear as something else and interpret differently. The lyrics really do paint nice pictures and creative turns of phrase and all those kinds of things that I like with writing. There is really no concern that anything written here is something you've heard people say time and time again. There are no cliches. There's no reliance on old tropes, if I might use a pun there, pardon me. I've never done that. But it's not a story. It's not a convoluted examination of some esoteric topic, as a lot of prog albums might be. But it's a very much an examination of the human experience from a lot of angles, told with a lot of lyrical depth. So I'm going to score this one a 4 for this section. Moving on to innovative. Holy smokes. Where to begin? This could take a while. I'm going to be honest here. I absolutely am wowed. Just flabbergasted, gobsmacked, whatever you want to say. For Trope, let's get into context. For Trope, this album has been a 4-year odyssey of passion and commitment and dedication. And these two have charted a journey during that time worthy of the Homeric epic in putting this album together. And I'll be honest, every ounce of blood, sweat, and tears comes through in the final product. I struggle to think, honestly, of another sophomore album that showed such immense growth from the artist's debut. I tried to think of some, nothing came to mind. I didn't take the time to research, so I'm sure some of you might be able to come up with some examples. I couldn't. This is going from a band that started with very clear Tool influences, with the more alt-rock side of things and melodic vocals more so than Tool tends to have. And they've just expanded their musical palette to include a multitude of new textures, styles, sounds, compositional approaches, vocal elements. I could hardly honestly cover them all here. So I'm really only going to try to highlight a few of them. One of which in particular for me is adding in the layered keyboards this time around that are just adding in this extra velvety depth and an atmospheric presence that you really didn't hear a ton of in the first album, with maybe, I think, one song an exception that comes to mind. But it just adds this this new flavor to everything. This in addition to the guitars and the bass and the drums. I like it. I enjoy it, and it's not overly done. It's not like some big jump, like going from Van Halen when they came out with 1984 and they led off with Jump, which was like so keyboard driven. It's not that much of a leap or a jump. I'm back with the puns again. Where are these coming from? I swear it's involuntary. but it's notable and it's there, and I enjoy it. And they've moved away a bit from their Tool-inspired foundation, or really enhanced or embellished it to add more mainstream type rock riffs, these grunge-inspired punch of I don't even know what to call it, music. Wow, such incredibly eloquent terms, Dave, and even more overtly metal elements this time around. And then later on in the album, in that side B, there's some smooth, rhythmic, guitar-driven pop that put me in mind of all things of Duncan Sheik, if you can believe that. So there's a wide range, and there's just a lot of different sounds there. And side A gives us this feast of what might have come across in lesser hands as just disparate elements jarringly Frankensteined into this patchwork of unrealized, unfocused music. Instead, what we get is a seamless blend of these influences into songs that somehow feel both epic without feeling interminable. And I don't know how else to explain it. I say they somehow found a way to marry expansive songwriting with concision, if you want to call 7 to 8 minutes concision, because they fit in as much as somebody might fit into a 15, 20-minute song. It's that expansive, but not running forever. Meanwhile, as good as Diana's vocals were on the first album, she reaches new heights this time around. She is fully exploring her range and adding new twists. There's a bit of rough grit, a little bit of rasp, I guess you might say, vocal fry, as they like to call it, in the opener, Spoiled Leaves, that adds just the right bit of pained emotion in perfect doses at the right moments. And that's just the beginning. I recall her saying during the last interview with me that when they were making the first album, because of her living situation, her apartment where she was, she felt she had to restrain her vocals for the sake of many things, mostly not disturbing the neighbors. And she wanted to really look to let go more on this album. She did it. Man, she did it. The vocals go beyond whatever you heard from her in the first album. Soaring vocals. She's reaching the limits of her range and maybe pushing herself beyond it, and it sounds great. And she's added harsh vocals to her repertoire. I did not have that on my bingo card for this album. Somewhere, it comes out somewhere between a scream and a growl. Reminds me almost a little bit of a black metal style vocal, but holy smokes, that came out of places I didn't expect happening. And it just adds this whole other dimension to the proceedings. And it's just really very impressive. I'm not a connoisseur of harsh vocals by any stretch. So all I can say is they add to the music. They don't take away. Though I don't necessarily also love them. But still, one has to admire the extent that these two have carried themselves. Oh, and by the way, Moonhead is singing now. And I don't just mean any backing vocals. He has now added his smooth tenor to the lead vocals on several tracks, and just providing what I found to be a delightful counterpoint to Diana's lovely tones in the backing vocals at the same time. These two together mix and mesh so nicely, but it's so cool to hear him stepping up to be front and center on some of these songs. And like I said, it's just this smooth tenor that I really enjoy. It took me so much by surprise when it popped up in the second song of side B. Kind of coming across as, I don't know, a mellow version of Scott Weiland. It's the best I could think of at the moment. I haven't quite placed it, but I feel like that's about as close as I've been able to in terms of describing it. Just adds a whole other layer to what this band is capable of doing. Now, ultimately, you can just hear and feel them taking the shackles off and running wild, exploring all directions with this album while not honestly losing track of who they are at their core. Their influences are diverse, and as much as that is made clear in this album, it still feels cohesive and it still feels like Trope. In short, this album represents a quantum leap for Trope, revealing them as a band fully capable of realizing whatever music dreams they care to concoct. I had some high expectations for this album after talking with them about their goals and what they had planned, and they absolutely exceeded them with gusto. First time I am scoring innovative on this for anybody. This is a 5. Absolutely a 5. Moving on now to technical. Now this isn't an album by virtuoso players in the Dream Theater template. This is, for me, more of a virtuoso performance in terms of composition, but don't let that lead you to think that there aren't some chops on display here as well. It's mostly the arrangements. They're complex without being precious. They deftly weave layers of instruments to provide power and support the melodicism of the vocals. They're exactly as heavy or light or dense or minimal as any particular song or passage requires. They do just what is needed, maybe take it right up to the level, but they don't exceed it. There are always interesting rhythms that tend more towards syncopation than timekeeping, and that goes throughout most of the album, and I like that. I've always expressed my love of syncopation. So they take the rhythm section beyond that, which I like that. And really, this approach is one that makes excellent use of their guest drummers, Gavin Harrison, Gunnar Olsen, who, to me, together embody the drumming approach of interesting and complex playing that always complements but never overshadows or competes with the other instruments. They chose their guest musicians perfectly, and that includes everybody that's on there. Nobody is going beyond their mandate, and but take it as far as they can within the mandate. Hopefully that makes sense. Meanwhile, I just can't help but be impressed by Moonhead's Swiss Army knife instrumental performance here. I mean, he's doing everything, and he's showing chops and he's showing feel, especially on bass in a lot of those sections there where there's just this nice, I don't know how to say it, this little extra emotion that's communicated with it, or this nice little extra bluesy feel at times. It adds just the right touches throughout the album. So I'm really impressed with that. I don't know that I recall noticing it that much on the first album, but boy, it stood out this time around. And whether they're moving from restrained to musical throat punches, they do it with casual ease, and that is no small feat. Scoring this one a 4 also. And finally, we wrap with emotional. Now, let me be honest, there's a lot of brooding darkness in this album, both lyrically and in the musical tone. Now, especially the musical tone, that that appeals to me. I like that. But it can also omit. It gets kind of heavy at times. It's raw emotions lead to a raw experience at times. Nonetheless, that also being said, they hit peak uplift in the middle of the album, or really best described as the beginning of side B, with the 1-2 punch of glory and happiness, really the two most uplifting, brightest songs on the album, and then the wistful reflection of Golden Brown. Though that last one, I'm going to say lyrically, it's more wistful reminiscence. But does rely on the moody side of things a bit, but we'll get back to that one shortly if you haven't already recognized the title. Plus, the highs and lows throughout side A really give one that emotional roller coaster effect that I've always loved about progressive rock. Where you escalate and you crescendo, and then you come back down and resolve a little bit, and then you build up, or maybe you just suddenly shift gears. I love all of that, and that's why it's probably my favorite side of the two sides. Now, mostly for me, the revelation here is that this album, in terms of the growth and the growth on display, has been the most exciting part. I mean, I expected something good, probably something really good, but to hear them unleash like this really just added an exhilarating element to all of it for me. I just couldn't help but feel like, wow, the joy of discovery the joy of the unexpected in a certain sense. And not that I didn't expect something good or really good from them, but they exceeded expectations here for me. I am scoring this section the rare 4. Now, as we go into a recap here, let's review what the scores are. Intellectual 4, innovative 5, technical 4, emotional 4. That, add them together, average out, gives us a raw score of 4.25. If you've been following me this year, that's a lofty position to be. Now, some additional thoughts here. And self-disclosure. Noting I work in a field, a paying job that is, where every training that I go to includes a section specifically where the trainer providing it is required to disclose any personal or financial interest in the material being presented. That's avoiding problems with conflicts of interest. That being said, I do in this moment feel compelled to do something similar here in sharing that, honestly, I'm kind of on friendly terms with Diana and Moonhead to a greater degree than with any of the subjects of my reviews or my interviews so far. I'll be upfront in noting as well that I contributed to funding this album. I'd like to see great music being made. So I'm just noting that up front. I also have a history of being friends with artists in the music business, and I mean people who seriously made a run at making it their career. They weren't fiddling around, they weren't playing in cover bands. I'm talking people that were creating and writing their own music and looking to make something big out of it. People signed to minor record labels, maybe not major. And I didn't like everything that they did equally well. And the things I didn't like as much, I really just didn't talk about with other people. Simple as that. I didn't trash it, and I may have been hesitant to say to them I didn't like it, but I just didn't really talk about it so much. For those of you watching this, and I hope you have watched other reviews I've done. If you haven't, go do that, please, so you can use the views. Anyway, I hope you see that I try to keep things 100 and present a genuine, honest opinion, and I try to do it as objectively as possible. I take my integrity, my personal integrity, very seriously. Even though this is just a YouTube thing, I'm not here to compromise my integrity on any level. That being said, that means I wouldn't be sitting here talking about this album so glowingly if I didn't mean it. I wouldn't want to ruin my own rep, whatever that's worth, by giving some sort of disingenuous review. In short, I'm not blowing smoke here, okay? I mean what I'm saying. That being said, I have to think, at this point, it's clear just how impressed I am with this album and with the artistic growth on display. These guys exceeded whatever I might have thought was coming, and they did it with panache. So, that being said, a few quick notes. Honestly, for me, I'm a little bit torn on the track listing. I'm back and forth, which also tells you just how little I have to nitpick about this album if I'm talking about the order of the songs. For me, my favorite tracks end up being the proggy ones. Shocker, I know. So the album's a bit front-loaded for me, with side A being all of that prog goodness. Not that I dislike side B at all. Matter of fact, I like it a lot. I just tend to like my different elements intermixed instead of separated. At the same time, keeping the prog and alt sides of the band separate does play into the concept of the album title, and that's a proggy thing to do, the two sides, the two parts of the dyad. That makes sense. I can't deny that. And, I'll admit, I recognize there's also an argument for many that it flows better this way, to make the stylistic transitions flow better. Like I said, something big and grandiose and multiple sections and metal riffs being back to back with something that sounds like, again, for lack of a better name, Duncan Chic. And I personally love that when it comes that way in my playlist, but other people might find that a little bit jarring on an album. Not that anybody listens to albums and try. That's why God invented shuffle, right? That's why there's random play functions on all this stuff. So do what you like. I guess I just noted that for some reason. Meanwhile, I want to say again that the expansion of their vocal contributions and styles on this album is just glorious. From Diana fully fully going out to the outer limits of her range and probably even expanding it. Moonhead taking a step forward into the spotlight to cover lead vocal duties and adding those wonderful harmonies at other times. That's just such a cool element that makes this album so impressive for me. I really dig that. I always love vocal harmonies anyway, but really, really impressive work on this. I will say I'm not previously familiar with the band The Stranglers outside of their name. Always knew them. I think they come about earlier in the timeline than I realized. So the cover of Golden Brown, told you we're coming back to it, inspired me to check out the original. This is something that is hitting on my musical pet peeves about cover songs. The original is a very sparse, very minimalist kind of song and arrangement. And what Trope does with it is does what I want artists to do when they are going to cover songs. I want them to put their stamp on the song somehow. I want them to make it their own in some way. I don't really get the point of note for note covers. I don't know that they need to exist, because if it's note for note and essentially sounds almost exactly like the original, you know what? I'll just go listen to the original. I want you to do something different with it. I want you to stretch it in some way, change it up, make it your own, make it very different from the original without being disrespectful to the original song. You know, and great examples. The classic example, if Jimi Hendrix turned out all along the Watchtower sounding just like Bob Dylan, nobody would have heard it. And nobody probably would have heard Dylan's original except Dylan fans. Hendrix made it his own, and he owns that thing forever. And I can't imagine it being done in a better way, because he did it his way. There, it's my soapbox for the moment. So, like I said, this takes a minimalist, jangly kind of song, this little pop thing, and turns it more into a brooding reminiscence that gradually builds into these ominous, heavier tones without ever getting carried away. This is Trope making the song all their own. And if you want another example of them doing that in a great way, go find their cover of Tears for Fears' Shout. It's on the first album, released as a single. That was an awesome version of that song. Great in all the ways the original was, but it was Trope's version and stood out. So I like that. I appreciate you guys doing that. So meanwhile, standout songs. I had a tough time because there are a lot of songs on here I liked, and limiting myself to just 3 standouts contributed to a bit of indecision. But I settled on 3 finally. Always right out the gate, Spoiled Leaves, the opener, comes out with these ominous peals of a church bell and then does this slow burn build into this grand blend of Rush and Tool with atmospheric background vocals before it just crescendos into Diana's screams as the song ends. And those screams aren't quite as harsh as she gets later, but they express, I think, the emotion of the song very nicely. And it's a grand opening to this album, I gotta say. Next, Past. That is, I think, the longest song on the album. I'm pushing more than 8.5 minutes. And it's them gone full prog with multiple distinct passages from this full tilt mechanical rock passage to open that shifts into ragged metal tinged riffs. And then there's a quiet midsection that pretty much just features piano and bass. And that's one of the nicest parts of Moonhead's bass playing that I hear here. And then it closes out with a blues-tinged blast of rock that just reminds of both Tool and Muse at the same time. It took me a while to finally figure out why some of those riffs sounded familiar, and then it dawned on me what Muse song we were talking about. And then finally, Glory. This is the most uplifting track on the album, and it launches off side B, which is interesting because it's slotted on the alt-rock side. But for me, it's very prog, and it opens with a truly grand prog-sounding intro worthy of like Big Big Train or IQ, and later flows into some just luscious vocal harmonies with Diana and Moonhead. Just a gorgeous song, and it really is, I think, the uplift that you need at this point in the album, because like I said, Side A, very heavy, very broody. And this comes in and just does it nicely. And that's followed up with Happiness, which is, yes, a happy song. Or a happy-ish song. At least it's not gushing happy. Meanwhile, final minor thought. Even though they actually debuted it a couple of years ago, this album cover is cover of the year for me. And it was always destined to be so. Just the best thing I've seen in a lot of album covers recently. One of the best, certainly. I always dug it, and I'm so glad they're running with it. I need the t-shirt. All right. So in the end, I think the raw score says it all. I have nothing to add and certainly nothing to subtract. This is a damn good album. And 4.25, if you are keeping track, those of you keeping score at home, yeah, that puts it tied for top-rated album of the year. And I'm not kidding. I'm saying this as genuinely as I can. So, it's not out yet. You can pre-order it. And hopefully you'll go do that. I will include the link so you can find it easily. I highly recommend it. If you like the songs they put out so far, you're going to love the album. No doubt in my mind about that either. If you're looking for something proggier, you got it. If you're looking for something that takes the alt side of things a little bit further down the road for them than the first album did and eschews some of that Tool-inspired sound, you're going to love that too. There's a lot to love here. That's what it comes down to. So hopefully some of you out there go out and pick this thing up right away, and you can get back to me on your thoughts. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you think of Trope. Trope fans, I want to hear from you. How excited are you for this album? Let me know. It's what the comments section is there for. And if you get bored with that, you can always hit the like and subscribe. That's fun too. I enjoy that. At least I do. Anyway, meanwhile, coming up next time, I think I'm still kind of deciding what album I'm going to go for next. Usually I have it planned out better than I do at the moment, but I've got a couple slated. I might squeeze in a prog shot in the meantime as well, maybe two, if I can find the time to squeeze it in. But we'll find out what it is when we get to it next week. I'll just leave it to be a surprise for you. Meanwhile, as always, I leave you with the reminder to never fear to deviate from the norm. Never fear to deviate from your own norm. Diana and Moonhead did not fear to do it, and this was the result. And finally, keep it proggy.